The topic is making Matan Torah every day. Um, that's, believe it or not, I think one of the greatest challenges and one of the most important lessons that we can have from Shavuot. It actually will in what's the word? Introduce us to a dimension of Jewish life which is ever so important, and which actually engages one of the biggest problems and one of the biggest challenges in traditional Jewish life today. But let's get started. My point of departure, I think anybody who studies will be familiar with the source. The parsha that we're going to read on, well, those of us who have a minyan or whatever, but traditionally we will read on Shavuot morning. The first line is B'chodesh HaShlishi, Latzeit B'nei Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim, Bayom Hazeh Ba'u Midbar Sinai. That on the first day, B'chodesh, the Rosh Chodesh, of the third month of Sivan, so that was actually yesterday. Latzeit B'nei Yisrael Me'eretz Mitzrayim, the third month since the going out of Egypt, because the first month is Nisan, the second month is Iyar, and now we're in the third month. Bayom Hazeh Ba'u Midbar Sinai. That's the day. This is the day that the Jews came out of Egypt, and the emphasis on Bayom Hazeh is unusual, for the simple reason that the Torah doesn't generally emphasize the importance of something happening on a specific day. The only other example that I can find, in fact, is part of another shiur, perhaps, is when the prophet Ezekiel gets the news that the siege of Jerusalem has started in 586 BCE. Again, the prophecy that he mentions there is today it started. Something really very fetching, very, very striking about the word today. So why use the words Bayom Hazeh here? So Rashi, in a famous comment, says as follows: B'Rosh Chodesh, it happened on the first day of the month, on Rosh Chodesh. Lo hayat tzarich ela bayom hahu. So bayom hahu, I understand. In other words, the Torah is recounting something that happened in the past. So it happened in the past, then it happened then. So it should have said B'chodesh HaShlishi Latzeit B'nei Yisrael Mitzrayim Bayom hahu. On that day it came, because it only happened once. Why Bayom Hazeh? Today, this very day. Yesterday, the Sunday, the 24th of May, 2020, the first day of Sivan, 5780. Why Bayom Hazeh? Sheyu divrei Torah chadashim alecha ki'ilu hayom nitnu. That words of Torah should be fresh and real and new for you, as if they were given today. It's a very nice thought, but what does that mean? Ki'ilu hayom nitnu. Now, the truth of the matter is, the easy way to understand it is simply something that we've all discovered. That if there's something that we didn't know, we've been bothered by some question or some kind of issue, and finally somebody tells us the answer. So we're all very excited. It's a wow, brand new piece of information, brand new piece of knowledge, blows you away. We should learn as if it's the moment that we've been waiting for, the moment that something we didn't expect. Okay, something very exciting. You learn something new. Of course, we all know the general principle that if you hear a new word, you'll hear it that you've never heard before. You'll hear it like endless times in the next coming days. But all right. I don't think that's all that Rashi is driving at. What does it mean, Ki'ilu hayom nitnu? What does it mean, Bayom Hazeh? Why the emphasis on the actuality of it, of the immediacy of the comment? I think that if you take a look at various passages in Chazal, you find that they had a much deeper sense of what Bayom Hazeh means, what the immediacy of Matan Torah means, and that speaks to the Jewish perception of time, which is something we've actually talked about in these shiurim, and also the way we should go about our Torah study. For example, the Talmud in Brachot Daf Kaf Aleph Amud Bet 21b says as follows: The Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, Kol hamelamed livno Torah, anyone who teaches his son or his student or his daughter, doesn't really matter, Kol hamelamed livno Torah, ma'aleh alav hakatuv, the Torah imputes it, the Torah considers it as if ki'ilu kibla mehar chorev, as if you didn't, when you prepared your lesson and then you gave it to your student or your son or your daughter or wherever you're teaching, it's as if you and they received it from Har Chorev. It's as if that you actually were at Mount Sinai. Chorev is another name for Sinai, and received the Torah together with the children of Israel and Moshe and so on and so forth. Shnei Amar, he quotes a pasuk. V'hodatem levanecha v'levnei vanecha, and you should inform your children and your children's children of what of Matan Torah. What should you teach them? Uchtiv batrei, and it says afterwards, Yom asher amadet lefnei Hashem Elokecha b'chorev. You should inform them of the day you stood at Sinai. It doesn't say you should inform them of the Torah. That you have other psukim, v'shinantam levanecha, you should teach the Torah. There's all kinds of psukim in the Torah that inform us that we should study. But that's not what this pasuk is saying. Well, this is not what this pasuk is saying, according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. It's not just a matter of the intellectual material that you are giving over, that you are saying, that you are inculcating in your students, but rather you're supposed to somehow provide your student with the experience of actually having been at Sinai. In other words, it's Torah study is not simply an act of intellection. It's not simply an act of bringing adding information to your gray matter. I mean, as is, we waste a lot of our gray matter anyways. But it's not just gray matter. It's not just study. Talmud Torah is supposed to be a spiritual experience wherein we are transported from wherever we are, whether you're in Hong Kong or South America or even without Zoom, South America or Israel or North America. It doesn't matter where you are, but you are emotionally and experientially at Sinai. The act of study should be an act of revelation. That's why Rashi says Bayom has ki'ilu hayom nitnu, Bayom hazeh, because you smash the limits of time, and you are transported to Matan Torah, and also you smash the limits of geography, and you are no longer where you really are, but in a very real and profound sense, you are also at Sinai. There was a wonderful TV show when I was a very little kid. It was called You Are There. And what they would do is they would pick historical episodes, and they had actors acting out whatever it was, and there was a reporter there with a microphone and a camera, and you got into the boat with George Washington crossing the Delaware, and so on and so forth. So this is precisely what Talmud Torah is supposed to be. You are not just studying the words that were said years ago, you are hearing them now for the first time. Which means that by extension, it's not just Sinai. It's a matter of when I am learning the Gemara learning Gemara and I study the words of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is in the room with me, or I, more importantly, am in the Beit Midrash of Rabbi Akiva in Bnei Brak, and he is teaching me directly. We have an ongoing. It's sort of like a transcendent kind of Zoom. We have an ongoing conversation, and his words actually span geography and the generations, and I have an intimate relationship with him as my personal teacher. And the same thing goes with Rashi, and the same thing goes with the Rambam, and it doesn't matter who it is. By Yom Hazeh Ba'al Midbar Sinai, you are there, and if you're studying Torah, ultimately you are at Sinai. Now, what does that mean? I mean, I'm beginning to understand what the words mean. What exact kind of experience is it that we have in mind here? So, as it happens in the same section of the Talmud, in this discussion in Masechet Brachot, the Gemara cites a Braita which expands on this idea. The Tanya, this is on Daf Kaf Bet Amud Aleph. It's the next page. The Tanya, we learned in a Braita. V'hodatam levanecha ulevnei vanecha. Uchtiv yom asher amarta lefnei Hashem Elokecha b'chorev. You teach it to your children, your children's children, the day, and it should be as if the day you were at Sinai. Okay, the same psukim that were mentioned by Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Ma lahalan be'ema uviyira uberetet ubezia, avkan be'ema uviyira uberetet ubezia. Just as the Jews confronted God or encountered God at Sinai with awe and fear and a shake and a tremor, and they were perspiring, they were so nervous, they were so scared, it was such an overpowering experience. The same way we should study Torah. What does that mean? What does that mean? I'm opening, I'll pull down a Gemara, I'll pull down a Rambam, and goodbye. What are we talking about? What was the act of revelation? What was the act of revelation? The act of revelation was not just learning via Moses. The act of revelation, the moment of Matan Torah, was far more than that. It was a direct, unmediated encounter with God. Nothing more and nothing less. Think about that. We would get nervous, lahavdil, if we met a celebrity. We would get nervous if we met our heroes. And at Sinai, the Jews encountered God, who spoke to them directly and gave them the Torah, or gave them the Ten Commandments at that point. And what was the response of the Jews? We can't take it. Daber ata imanu v'nishma'a v'al yadaber imanu halokim pen namut. They say to Moses, this is too much for us. You mediate, because our encounter with God is just too much for us to handle. But that's the nature of the encounter. So when Chazal are saying, and when Rashi is saying, that when you come and you study Torah, you should be at Sinai, it's not just a matter of it's fresh and it's brand new and it's enlightening and it's exciting. It's more than that. The act of study, the act of Torah study, is not an act of study the way that we know from university, the way that we know from other kinds of schools we might have gone to. Totally different experience. It is not just a act of intellection, it is an act of encountering God, who is the one who gave the Torah, who has commanded us to in fact study it. And we are supposed to be enveloped, totally enveloped in this moment of encountering God. This requires a lot of us. That means we should be prepared. We should be prepared for Torah study. We should get in the mood for Torah study. And if we treat Torah study as something which is just a matter of like doing my homework, like, or I'm going to read another book, well, you know what? We in English at least, in Hebrew also to a certain degree, but in English, we often talk about when we prepare I hear about it when I prepare a shiur. Some said, well, don't forget to bring texts. Text means something that's read. Textus, that's a word in Latin. But a text, I'll give you an example of a text here. I'll show you what I have on my desk. This is a volume of the translation of the Inferno by Dante Alighieri. Dante Alighieri is one of my favorite writers. I keep a copy of one English translation over my desk. I have the two versions of the Italian behind me. I even have a little bust of Dante because he's one of my heroes. Okay, but when I studied Dante, I got it in Ravenna where he's buried. But when I study Dante, I don't think I'm studying text, and it's interesting and it can be inspiring, but it's a text. It was a text written by a human being at a certain time in the 13th century, and that's it. Torah is not text. Torah is the living, pulsating word of the creator of the universe. And when you open up, whether it's a Chumash or whether it's a Gemara, whether it's a Mishnayot or whether it's a philosophy book, it doesn't matter. You're through the words of, well, in terms of Chumash, it's God's words, but through the words that are derived from that, from Torah, that based on Torah, you're encountering God. And therefore, that requires not just putting yourself in the right mood. By the way, that's the reason why Ezra, we don't do this anymore, but there was a time when Jews would actually go to mikveh before they would even study. It's not a matter of going to mikveh before you go to Har Bayit or whatever the case may be. No, they would go to mikveh before they studied, because the act of learning Torah is not just a matter of information. It's a matter of worship and encountering God. You would bathe and get ready to go to shul, or you would do it you would dress in your best clothing to go and meet some kind of celebrity, or if you were invited to the Knesset, we would hope. But anyways, you get the point. Or to meet the Queen of England. The same thing is true, all the more so when you're studying Torah. It's an act which transcends time. It's an act which transcends the moment. It transcends your own life. Now, this idea is actually has a halachic implication. The Shulchan Aruch, before we study, we say Birkat Torah. We say the blessing on the Torah. Now, it's a question of whether it's 3 brachot or 2 brachot or whatever, but it's Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu V'Cholam Asher Kiddushanu Mitzvah V'Tzivanu Al HaTorah, according to the Sfardim, or Lasot B'Divrei Torah, to occupy yourself in the words of Torah, and during the Ashkenazim, V'Arevna Hashem Elokeinu with Divrei Torah Tzchabfinu V'Fi Amcha Yisrael, and then you say Basher Bachar Banu, and then you learn a little bit every day, 2 or 3 brachot, depending how you count. Interestingly, in Shulchan Aruch, you have a very interesting statement. Before discussing questions of, like, when do you say Birkat Torah, when do you not say Birkat Torah, Rabbi Yosef Karo starts his discussion of Birkat Torah by saying, Birkat, this is Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Siman Mem Zayin, it's Seif Aleph, section 47, paragraph 1. Says Rabbi Yosef Karo, Birkat HaTorah tzarich lizaher ba me'od. You have to be very, very careful to always make sure to say Birkat Torah, to say a bracha before you learn, if you hadn't davened that morning. Some people actually say Birkat Torah every single time that you learn. The common practice is to say it once in the morning. And the reason is because we never, Rabbi Yitzchak of Dompierre once said, because a Jew should never really take his mind off the Torah. So it doesn't really take his mind off the Torah really, so there's no hefsek, there's no break between the time you said the bracha and your ongoing study, which is a topic for another talk. But in any event, why tzarich lizaher? I mean, you should be careful about everything. Why make a point of, before you even get down to saying what this bracha is, that you are going to that you're asked to be careful? So the answer is, it seems to be based on a comment of another Talmudic comment in Masechet Baba Metzia. It's a very strange Gemara. The Gemara says as follows. This is Baba Metzia Daf Pehei Amud Aleph Amud Bet. It's the end of the bottom of Pehei Amud Aleph, the top of Amud Bet. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda quoted Rav saying, My dichtiv, what does the pasuk mean? What does the Navi Yirmiyahu mean when he says, Mi ha'ish hachacham v'yaven et zot, v'asher diber pi Hashem elav, v'yagida. Who is the wise man who can understand this, or who could comprehend this, and to whom God has spoken and can tell us the answer? In other words, there is something that is so troubling. There is something so beyond our ken, something so beyond our understanding that the prophet says, somebody explain this to me. Something here is totally bizarre. I don't get it. What's so difficult? What's so hard? Let that wise person explain to us al meh avda haaretz. In the time of Jeremiah was the prophet. Obviously, we all know of the first Churban. He was the person who witnessed the destruction of the first temple. He prophesied the destruction of the first temple. And he says, how is it possible that the nation, that the country was destroyed? Somebody explain it to me. And then he says, then Jeremiah says, the reason was alo zvam et torati. The Torah was the world, the country was destroyed, the nation was destroyed, the Babylonians conquered because the Jews abandoned the Torah. That's the pasuk. Okay, Beseder. But look what the Gemara says. Look what the Gemara says. After quoting this pasuk, the Gemara says, "Davar ze amru chachamim v'lo pirshuhu." The chachamim, who's the chacham? The rabbis, the learned people, tried to explain it. They asked the question, they couldn't figure it out, why the country was destroyed. Amru neviim v'lo pirshuhu. And the prophets, v'yaged asher diver pi Hashem, that's the person who speaks in the name of God, that's a prophet. The prophets couldn't figure it out. Ad shepersho HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'atzmo. Until God himself announced what the reason was. So what was the reason? Shenemar, at the end of this verse in Jeremiah, Vayomer Hashem asher alazvam et torati asher natati lifnehem, because they abandoned my Torah that they gave them. Now, the truth of the matter is that we, know from other places that there were real good reasons for the country to be destroyed and the temple to be destroyed. There was idolatry, and there was murder, and there was sexual immorality all over the place. And so, all right, but so what was so difficult? So what you learned from, first of all, the fact that the sages and the prophets couldn't figure it out meant that there were certain developments, historical developments, that they couldn't even though rationally somehow they could understand that something could happen, but they couldn't imagine it. There were certain things we can't imagine. Those of us who have parents, and they should live and be well, can't imagine a world without their parents. You know what? We can't imagine a world in which we don't exist. I mean, try to do this as a thought test. Can we imagine a time in which we're not here and the world goes on without us? No, there are some things beyond us. Now, intellectually, we know that, but there are certain limits to our capacity. And the destruction of the destruction of the country, the invasion of the Babylonians, the destruction of the temple was such a thing. So God himself had to come and say, I'll tell you why. Alozvama Torati. You might not think it's powerful enough, but I'm telling you that the abandonment of Torah by the Jews was sufficient to warrant and to justify the destruction of the Torah, the destruction of the country and the destruction of the temple. If it were to stop here, I would say, okay, that's fine. But that's not where the Gemara ends. The punchline is what's the word used? Radical? The punchline is radical. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. What does it mean that the Jews abandoned the Torah? Sheleberchu b'Torah tchila. They didn't make Birkat Torah before they learned. Hello? What kind of thing is that? You have idolatry, you have sexual immorality, you have murder, you got all kinds of stuff. You have blatant. Yirmiyahu complains about lack of Shmir Shabbos and not keeping Shemitah, and there's all kinds of stuff. They didn't make Birkat Torah. This is what makes the Torah. This is what leads to destruction. Really? Are you kidding? But Rav was a very serious person. Rav was a very serious person, so he wouldn't give a half-baked answer. He's not going to give an answer which makes no sense. So we have to make some kind of reach some kind of appreciation of what does he mean by virtue of the fact that what does he mean here. So I would like to make the following suggestion. It is possible that I heard this originally from my teacher of Soloveitchik, and if I did hear from him, then I don't have it down anywhere. Then he gets the credit. If not, it's derivative from things that I learned from him. What do you mean he didn't? what do you mean it didn't make the bracha before? What does making Birkat Torah before you study, what does that do? What did you say? What do you say as a result? So I think you say two things. The first thing that you say is you say that we appreciate the fact that we have the privilege of studying Torah and that the Torah comes from God. That by itself can help us understand this sort of this unusual statement by Rav. Because, as I said before, the Divine Comedy, Shakespeare, Boccaccio, whoever else you want, their text. What we study is Torah. It's a work of a totally different tenure. It's a totally different character. And indeed, our assumptions about its character and its nature, that it's eternal, that that we can't ever, it has depth and dimensions which we have not even begun to understand. It keeps going and going and going. It's Rechava Miniyam. It's broader than the sea. When you say Birkat Torah, you are basically saying the Torah is not like any other constitution or legal system or value system that we know. First of all, it is binding on us because it comes from God. It's an assertion as the divinity of the Torah, whether that's derivative or whether that is, in other words, it's actually chumash, which comes from the word, which is the very word of God, or it's derivative it's based on. It means that our obligation towards the Torah is different. It means that our deference to the Torah is different. It means that we won't judge the Torah. And it means that the Torah is not just some ancient text which has one meaning that was determined by some Ugaritic somebody or some Babylonian or some Egyptian, and that's the end. And that was then and this is now. The Jew believes that the Torah was given by God. It's our privilege to be able to study the Torah because it was given by God, and it's an attitude of reverence and humility that, in fact, we approach the study of Torah. We don't judge the Torah. We serve the Torah by committing ourselves to understanding, but to begin with in our own modest ways to try to understand, just as Jews throughout the centuries have done. That's, in fact, I will tell you, and I say this as a person who's, you can see my library is divided between Kodesh and Chol. That is the fundamental difference between Torah and academic Jewish studies, of which there is much, and there's many riches, but there's a difference. In academic Jewish studies, people treat the Torah as a dead document, which is not God, Chalila, not God-given, and they reach sometimes conclusions about the Torah that you're totally wrong. The truth of the matter is that that's not Torah. And to assume that a book in Jewish studies is Torah is wrong. It could be, depends on who wrote it, and depends on how they write it. Torah is an act of worship. Studying Torah is to study the Word of God, and it comes from an a priori commitment to God and to 3,000 years of tradition and to 3,000 years of belief. When I say Asher Kedeshanu Mitzvah Tzivanu Lasok B'Divrei Torah or Al HaTorah, all of it, I am basically committing myself to this book that will instruct me and teach me. Okay, I will raise my. I will talk a little louder. So as a result, so that's number one, and number two. Asher Kedeshanu Mitzvah Tzivanu Lasok B'Divrei Torah means when you say make Birkat Torah, the answer is what that means is you put yourself into the tradition of Torah and you go back to Sinai. You not only assert something with regard to the Torah about its nature and the nature of the encounter with God, but you're encountering God. I'm basically saying this is a mitzvah. This is an act of worship. In fact, the Rambam, when he describes the mitzvah of worshiping God, he in the Sefer Mitzvot, he says, "Avdehu b'Talmud b'Tfilah, Avdehu b'Torah." You worship God both by studying and by prayer. And the truth of the matter makes sense because it's a dialogue. Torah is what God has to say to me, and Tefillah is what we have to say to God. And for those, there are those. I mean, I come from a Lithuanian tradition, partly. Those who actually say that they prefer to study over to pray. You begin to understand it, because what's more important, what I have to say to God or what God has to say to me? The fact that God gives me the privilege of telling Him what's on my mind and allow to express it, that's a privilege. But if I have to figure out how I'm going to prioritize my time, so some people will say studying what God has to say to me is more important. That doesn't mean you don't pray. The question is a question of emphasis. But the point is that Al HaTorah brings us back exactly to that same Rashi, that when we open up, no matter what we study, and we study always from a book, whatever we study, when we're open study, we are there. We are enveloped by sanctity. We are aware of the fact that God is as if our personal tutor, and we are constantly and perpetually transported to that sublime moment 3,200 years ago, when the word Anochi was uttered, and all the people shuddered and couldn't take it. But that moment in which they encountered God, because God started to teach them Torah individually, and everybody heard as to according to their capacity, that's a moment which is then and which is now, and which is why Rashi says that they should be new to you as if today they were given, for a very simple reason, because they are every single day given today. Chag Sameach. Again, I apologize for the mix-up on the hours, and Bemet Chag Matan Torah Sameach today, and in fact every day.